I'm Dr. Harry Wilkins. My co-host here is Dr. Hedi Aguiar. Hedi is the principal of Fundamental Roots, as you all know. And this is a segment that we have started called Fundamental Roots and Friends. So, Hedi, with that, if you had anything else to add about Fundamental Roots, I would let you introduce our guests.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I wanted to make sure we had some sessions where we're talking to people who have had cross-cultural experiences. I grew up internationally and I met these two ladies a few years ago, and the instant we met, I said, I'm a missing triplet. I mean, it's obvious. That I'm the missing triplet. Well, maybe not. I'm not quite as beautiful as these two ladies. But our personalities just clicked immediately. And something that we have in common is that we've had to move from different countries to other countries at a very young age and learn cross-cultural communication skills at a very young age. And one of the things is you can get really wrapped up in all of these theories about cross-cultural communication and how do you communicate more effectively with different cultures. But the reality is ultimately there's basic principles that we can apply where it's just impossible to learn everybody's culture, because the reality is you have national culture, which is a generalization of a nation. But then you also have everybody's individual culture. And so it's you could easily offend somebody if you run with what is national culture. And so I wanted to ask my two dear friends, Dr. Nalishebo, Elliott, who is married to a good friend of mine as well, and Dr. Nandi Spry. Both of them not medical doctors, but I will ask you to share shortly what your doctorates are in. Shebo is joining us from the UK. So Shebo, if you can just briefly share, you are the head nurse of patient experience, is that correct?
Yes, head of patient experience, yes.
Head of patient experience in London at a hospital, a prestigious hospital. And Shebo, what is your doctorate in?
So my doctorate's in the health and well-being of female street sex workers. So I was looking at the lived experience of female street sex workers in inner city London, so in the King's Cross area. Mm-hmm. And it was quite profound just to see how, survival sex, for instance, is used as a way of, women coming from very vulnerable backgrounds. That's how they experience their life, and very tragic stories that I acquired for my thesis. So I think I felt very privileged to have, been part of the whole PhD experience with these women.
That's amazing work, yeah. And then Nandi, you're joining us from Australia. I'm really excited that this live stream is working so far, so good, from our first international live stream. And Nandi, you're an educator, you do casual academics, I know you lecture at university. And what is your doctorate in?
Yeah, so I evaluated a human resource development program to determine how women are mobilized through education and employment. And it was also a privilege to work with different women from all cross-cultural contexts, and women from detention centers, culturally linguistic groups, church groups, to determine how their self-esteem, emotional intelligence, and purpose are increased. So it's a really effective program. It's called Shine, and it's still running even up to today in about 50 plus nations.
That's amazing, yeah. Well, Nandi and Shebo, one of the reasons, as I mentioned, that we just kind of instantly had something in common was international experiences growing up. So tell us a little bit about your life story. I'm not sure who wants to start. And then if you can share where you grew up and what your international moving experience was, and then we'll dive into a little bit of what were the cultural things that you learned along the way.
Nandi, do you want to go first?
This is good. We're going to be doing this all throughout this interview.
We'll be doing the twin thing.
Yes.
That's what's so fascinating to me. I was wondering how that was going to play out. Which twin defers to the other twin? I love it.
Nandi's we need to do these cues like hint, hint, or
Yeah, a little scratch in the face. It's your turn.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Hedi and Harry, for having us on this live stream. So basically, Shebo and I grew up in Zambia. So we were born in Zambia, and to a Zambian mother and an Australian father. And we spent the first 12 years in Zambia, which is actually quite significant if you think that subconsciously your first 10 years your value system is set. So we actually carried with us our African roots, if you like, which were our beliefs, values, behavior, attitudes. So we kind of had that collectivist framework already set from an African, I guess, perspective. And then moving to Australia, we actually moved to a small country town in the Northern Territory called Katherine, which was predominantly First Nation people and farm kids, I guess. And
that was in Australia, Nandi?
Yes, that was in Australia. So that was our context. So moving from an international school, if you like, in Zambia to a small country town in the Northern Territory that had one high school. I mean, it was quite a contrast. I remember the first day we went to school, I said to my dad, "Can we go home now? Like, where are we?" Like, you know. But yeah, it was an incredible experience in itself. And Shebo, if you want to elaborate.
Oh, good. Okay, so what Nandi said, growing up in Zambia and developing our, how can I say, our attitudes, behavior, and our ways of being stemmed from a strong affiliation that we had with my mother's, how can I say, what do you call it, Nandi? Not tribe. So my mother's tribe is Lozi. And we developed, not only a liking for the traditional foods, which we carry through even up to today, but just our way of communicating with adults. For instance, respect is a big thing. How you speak to people that are older than you. We've carried that through into our working lives, and I think we go far because of that. And other attributes are, in Africa, for instance, in Zambia, when an issue erupts in the family, you all come together and discuss that issue. My mum was the eldest in her family, so she was almost the matriarch of the family. So we were privileged to sit in these meetings and see how problems are resolved, within that, big family kind of structure, if you like. And so we feel quite privileged to then have moved to Australia, although we had very strong connections with our Australian family because we visited quite a lot while we were in Zambia. And this, I guess, helped us to adapt well in Australia. The only issues were that because we went to a small country town, we had to adapt to people's sort of narrow-mindedness, if you like. So, for instance, we were still asked questions of, so did you live, with lions in your backyard, or, did you live in a hut? And so this kind of thing, so we had to adapt.
There was one time the question came up and I said, yes. And I actually have a big spear outside my hut. And we basically cook. We have to light fire with stones, and I was proper like telling them this is how we live, and they were like, "Really? My gosh!" Yeah, I really had them. Yes. Yeah. So it's good, Shebo, and that's something I was saying to Hedi. Those are the unspoken rules of engagement that we carry along. And I noticed even with working with our First Nation people is respect is a big element of of someone's culture, and having
So,
that.
sorry,
Yeah.
Nandi, when you say First Nation people, you're talking about what we commonly would refer to as Aborigines, but they prefer to be referred to as First Nation people?
No, First Nation, Aboriginal Australians, and then also that you can communicate them through their nation. Like, for example, the Gadigal country, the Eora Nation. Yeah, so Australia actually, before it was colonized, had many nations that comprise Australia. So it was like Africa with all the nations, the countries. Yeah.
All right.
That's interesting.
So maybe we'll do a future session with Nandi on the First Nation culture and just learning a little bit more about that if folks are interested. And then Shebo, so Nandi, you stayed in Australia, but then Shebo, you moved to the UK
Yeah.
at what age?
So I moved to the UK when I was about 21. And the reason being, I'd finished my nursing degree. I'd won a big contest, and I just wanted to leave Australia, actually, because I was the first woman of color to have won Miss World Australia. And at the time, I just found it very difficult to sort of press through with any kind of dreams or plans that I had. So it's unfortunate, you know, I almost felt like I was running away. And when I came to the UK, I just all of a sudden had this sense of complete freedom, you know. No one questioned me. No one sort of asked, no, but where are you from? You know, you're not Australian, or, you know, you're not full African. So, you know, there's all these kind of, how can I say, I enjoyed, you know, moving to the UK because it was such an eclectic mix of people of all different types, and you know, I just blended in really well, and I didn't experience, and up to today, any kind of sort of discrimination, if you like. You know,
And you're in London, of course, which helps. Which
yeah,
is
I'm in London. Exactly. So I've been here now for about 18 years. So yeah, it's a long time, you know, having spent 12 years in Zambia, 12 in Australia, you know, and now majority of my time actually in the UK. And so I belong to three nations, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So coming from, well, first of all, what's both of yours favorite memory of the culture in Zambia? Each one of you. You might have different favorite memories.
Nandi?
Oh, there's so many. I remember traveling with my dad to various national parks, and one vivid memory I have is he had a pickup truck, and we'd be sitting in the back of the truck driving to Malawi, you know, in the pickup truck, you know, and just experiencing the vast savanna plains and the like clear blue sky. And yeah, I think the wildlife there, and then obviously family, like we have such a strong family there, like incredible aunties and uncles, grandma, that are just as equivalent to, you know, my mom and dad. And so I terribly miss that. Yeah, I think those are the main two.
Yeah, and I think for me, you know, I've enjoyed the traditional foods. Well, mangoes.
I think because you're pregnant.
That's what I'm thinking of, isn't it? But yeah, just a very fond memory is just sitting on a mat, you know, under a mango tree and just eating traditional food, you know. It's bliss and not having a care or worry in the world.
Well, you were a bit younger then too.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, true.
Yeah. Well, so both you mentioned, Nandi, you mentioned the Collectivist Society, and Shebo, you referenced, you know, how you had these family meetings, and your mom is the matriarch. I guess two questions. One, is that typical in the Zambian culture that from a national culture perspective, that that mom in the family is usually the decision maker and the leader. And then the second follow-up question is, how do you define, what's the difference between collectivist versus an individualistic? Because you moved to a very individualistic society in Australia, but maybe for our listeners, what's the difference there?
Yes.
Nandi, I'll answer the first question, and then you can answer the second, which is up your stream. So my mom, so not usually that a woman is given that privilege, I guess. It was because she's the eldest in the family. And therefore, given her, how can I say, given who she was as well, she's a strong, proud woman, and therefore she took that position. She just, walked in it. And it also, she was known as chief of staff, basically, because she had this very authoritarian, type of leadership, but also very accommodating, very sort of, what are you saying, Nandi?
No, she was a don't mess with me.
Yeah.
She had the spear.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely loving. She loved people. People came in and out of our house all the time. But when it came to principles and getting down to business, she was serious, and she would sit and listen and then make a decision. But it involved her brothers. She has, very strong brothers too, who one is a bishop of, a large number of churches in Africa, actually, Australia and England. And the other is a doctor who's also a minister. So very strong. We come from a strong heritage, if you like, on our mother's side, which has really imprinted on Nandi and I, in our development and in how we see ourselves, in our confidence, in our security, so we're very fortunate to have that. Yeah, there's no wishy-washy.
And accomplished women, and I can see that you're always striving for the next thing and really leaving your mark on the world, just like I know your mom had a big impact on her village and the tribe where you lived.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Nandi?
And we are quite competitive, being twins, so that kind of spurs each other on. Like, when I started my doctorate, Shebo was like, "Yeah, I'm doing that too."
A little healthy competition.
Yeah,
right?
we help each other, which is great, But yes, Shebo, you're alluding to cultural values, and I think we all have individual cultural values which frame our identity. So that's very important. And coming to the collectivist and individualist, I think collectivist society, they have a responsibility to their family first and foremost. So it's not egocentric; it's more ethnocentric. So we think about, and a lot of even indigenous cultures, that's how the societies run. You are part of a organism that's functioning, and if you step out of line, you're going to get
So auntie and uncles might set you straight as much as your parents set you straight. Yeah, everybody's your parent.
That's right. And and it's that whole obedience versus independence, mentality, and respect, like you said, your elders, and and that helps even with children flourishing, because you know where your boundaries are. And I think a lot of society, there can be the breakdown of that family structure, and so unfortunately, that's what is the the aftermath of children that maybe are a little bit wayward. Is that family structure, that extended family is not around. And I have in Sydney, we have our brother, and unfortunately we don't have like that sort of family structure, but I've created one. Next door, literally 10 meters from me, I have a neighbor who is like an auntie to my kids. The professor in mathematics and lecturer in physics. And then upstairs I have she's like a grandma to my kids. And so I've tried to create this structure because I know how important it is for a child's development.
So when you moved to the Australia, which is considered a more individualistic society, how does that differ? What's the difference in an individualistic society versus a collectivist society?
Yeah. Okay. So I think individualist society is all about me, myself, and I, you know, and I'm going to climb up this corporate ladder regardless of, you know, anyone else sort of thing. Whereas collectivist society is you're a pack, you know, you're a team. And, you know, we join our cultural values and, you know, we create that cultural synergy in order to move, you know, whether it's a business forward or family forward or, you know, whatever structure you've developed, you've created. Yeah. So I think it's more a collaborative approach, which I love. Yeah. I love that term, that word collaborative.
Do you think it teaches you to be more collaborative?
Yes, absolutely. And like David and Goliath, and how David had these stones, you know, he had a few stones in his hand. I feel like if you can have that sort of unspoken rules of engagement where you have a few stones in your hand, like respect, like honesty and responsibility, I think, like Shebo said, that would take you far, you know, and you carry these stones wherever, whichever cultural divide, whichever cultural continent, you know, even that you travel to, those stones, those elements will take you forward in life.
So before I move on to my next question, Dr. Wilkins, do you have any questions for our guests?
I do. You know, Hedi, you and I talk about culture quite a bit. You actually take that portion. I've lived in the United States all my life and mostly in the Midwest. But for Nandi and Shebo, one of the things that you talked earlier about is both of you have fairly intense jobs. But you're, you know, in medicine, we talk about having a control, and you guys in a study act as your own controls. You grew up literally in the same culture, and you've divulged a little bit, but you've kept elements of your own. How does the experiences that you've had, how does that impact your workplace in terms of how you interact with others and how the effect that others interact with you has on your work?
Really good.
I can answer that. So we have quite a few, you know, African or Jamaican or, you know, older type aunties, you know, I like to look at them as, and, you know, I look at them in that way as aunties with great respect, you know, so that comes from having lived in Zambia and how to treat, you know, my aunties and uncles that are older than me. You know, I've then brought this through, you know, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so liked, you know, in my workplace, is because I treat everyone with that great respect, which Nandi was talking about, comes from that collectivist society. And not only that, but even within, you know, hierarchical, you know, the structure, for instance, in hospital, even in my role as head of, you know, I'm very sort of respectful to those above me, but also to everyone. You know, you treat everyone the way you'd want to be treated. And that stems from, you know, growing up in Zambia, you know, Australia too, you know, that whole mateship, you know, cultural element. You know, it's about your mates treating everyone, you know, as you would want to be treated. You know, I think that comes from our upbringing and exposure, living in Zambia and in Australia too, I must add.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Nandi, did you have something?
Yeah. Just to add on to, not obviously everything you said is amazing. I think also in a sporting setting, so we both played netball quite competitively, and you're a team. You know, you're always a team. You always work together as a team. So I think even bringing that into the workplace, So you're not trying to be the the what would you call it?
The
You know,
star,
sole,
you're the only one.
yeah, the sole trader sort of thing, but being in partnership, it moves any organization forward. But also, I think building towards something. I think that's something that is a great tool that you carry. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it's
It makes
ingrained,
great
isn't it?
sense.
It's ingrained from our
Yeah.
upbringing, isn't it? Yeah.
I guess one question I would ask here is, so looking at the other way. So when you have a great culture ingrained in you, and in the course of your work, if you find people who have the opposite, like for instance, if you met someone who has a highly individualistic culture, um, how would that how would you alter how you interact with them?
Very good question.
Yeah. You want me to answer, or have you got a response, Nandi?
No, it's okay. I mean, immediately I just went to the whole working with men, and a lot of the times you're trying to work around the ego as well. So, trying to identify that, okay, yes, I'm very aware of your, you know, how you perceive, reality. But I think also being mothers, we're mothers. It's about, I think, educating people that we can do more together, as a team.
Yeah.
Shape, you can say.
Yeah. And I think as well, when you work with someone who is individualistic in his thinking, or her, it's interesting to be tolerant and almost not be reactive, and
Gotcha.
understand, yeah, and understand that, you know, they still haven't had their mind open to a different way of thinking, and
Yeah.
that's okay,
Yes.
and
Yeah, it's tough though. It takes a lot of work on your part. We have a
yes,
question from the audience. Nicole Rottinghouse says, I would be interested to learn what motivated you to go into your careers and choose the specific focus. I can imagine the link between your two focus areas really allows you to work off each other as well as to build upon your own communities. Also, you stated that the Australian culture is individualistic. Have you been able to bring the culture of teamwork into the work you do and have it be received well? There's a lot in that question, but that's an amazing question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so if I can just clarify, obviously Australian culture, it's also very diverse. So I'm not just talking about Australia as a continent, but I guess I'm talking about I guess the colonialist mentality is quite individualistic. Yeah, so I don't mean to offend anyone who's out there, but a lot Australia is quite diverse now. We have a lot of different cultures as well. Yeah. So getting back to the workplace and working in a team, I have the most incredible team that I work with at the university I teach, and the team leader or subject coordinator, who's now the academic dean of my faculty in health. She has such a compassionate, considerate, like considers everyone as an equal player, contributing information. She's always on the front foot with informing you. We have Zoom meetings every week to talk about any issues that have arisen through our teaching. And a lot of the students come from other countries. So we take that on board. So it's very much about all of us being on the front page. No one is left in the lurk with what their responsibilities are. And I think that's an incredible attribute to a woman who's been in the health industry for 40 plus years. So she's obviously worked with a lot of different people and knows the importance of team in moving forward. And she hosts other subjects, and this team, it's so congruent that she's asked us to be a part of another subject because we have learnt the dynamics, and what moves the team forward. I hope that answers a bit of the question.
It really does.
I wanted to talk about why we chose our subjects, because I know that was an area of interest in that question. So Nandi and I, because we've grown up in a developing nation and we've also spent time in the Northern Territory, we've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot, we've listened a lot. And I think from that, we're very sort of, how can I say, our passion lies with women and the vulnerability of women, because at any moment, my sister and I could have been that woman too. And what I mean by that is, you know, it's very easy to, you know, growing up an attractive young girl, you know, we were in Zambia, then we moved to Australia, you know, things can happen. We've had trauma in our lives as well. So we've seen how brokenness and hurt, you know, can really play a part in your identity. So we've been fortunate. We have faith. I think that's really helped us to be strong through that trauma. But we have a heart for women. So hence my subject, exploring, you know, the health needs of female street sex workers. And then Nandi's work with the empowerment work of women in vulnerable situations as well. And you're right, both our topics do go hand in hand. So I guess that's where we have much understanding for the same kind of passion, which is women.
And our dream, or my dream, is for us one day to collaborate more together. Would you say so?
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
We just live so far apart. I mean, we're in two worlds, northern and southern hemisphere. I mean, that is not right for twins, right? I mean, we're supposed to be like close and, you know, sharing each other's toothbrushes and la-di-da.
I wondered, from when you moved to Australia, what are really the tips? Because ultimately what I would like to help our audience to learn is what are the main things you have to remember when you're interacting with somebody of a different culture and you don't really know what their culture is. You don't understand their culture. You just know that obviously things are a little bit different. What is the utmost important principles that you learned through your life experience of at a young age, moving from Zambia to Australia? And then also you dealt with different cultures even within Australia, right? With the First Nation, and then you also had the white Australians, and there are differences there as well. What are the main kind of key principles that anybody could apply in becoming more effective in cross-cultural communication?
Okay, so one thing that's very important to understand is that you can't change someone's culture. That's impossible because it's already ingrained, embedded in them. But what you can do is understand, okay, across cultures, that everyone faces the same fundamental dilemmas of life. Okay, everyone faces hardship. Everyone faces, you know, challenges. No one is free of that. Number two is everyone's actions are governed by their culture. So you can't change that as well. And that's what regulates their behavior. Another, what we've learned as well is that, like Shebo, you said, everyone is deserving of respect.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, culture influences the way people feel, interact, engage with people. So it's just understanding that in order to have a successful interaction between two people, there is a culture divide. And so how do you overcome that divide?
Yeah, that's good. And I also feel that what we brought with us as well from Zambia is survival. So, you know, it was interesting because, you know, we had two cultures blended in us. So we had the Australian and then we had the Zambian as well. And so, you know, we spent a bit of time with my mom without my dad. And she taught us a lot about how you get through those hardships that Nandi's talking about, you know, those challenges, you know, how you push through, that endurance, that, you know, you see people, exactly, perseverance. You see people in the developing world, they don't have much, you know, but they still have a smile on their face. They still push through life.
I remember, Shabo, we had a garden, didn't we? And you know, there were times when there was hardly any food, you know, and in the house, and Mom would always say, well, why should I cook? I have two girls, and we were 12 years old then. And Shabo, especially, you were quite domestic, and but we had a garden. We grew carrots, we had tomatoes, we had tomatoes. You know, we had our own vegetables in our garden, and that's the moment that sustained us. Or Mom would pop popcorn, you know, as a business, and sell them, or make buns, you know, to sell on the road, so we could have a bit of money to buy food. I mean, those were survival skills that, you know, that we learned, and that have taken us forward, because, you know, you can put us on an isolated island and we'll make it, you know.
One of the big things that you talked about is, both of you have touched on, is the respect part, and respecting that you cannot change somebody else's culture. They might, our own culture evolves over time based on the values that we adopt for ourselves. But like you said, you can't change somebody else. It's really up to them. But the big piece is, like you said, how you treat people, if you treat them with respect. And that's where the cultural humility comes in, right? What was the biggest shift culturally? I mean, you had an Australian father, although you were raised a lot of the first few years till you were 12 by your mom. What was the biggest cultural adjustment moving from Africa to Australia for you? What was, despite maybe having learned a little bit about the Australian culture from your dad, but.
Yeah. Wow. I don't really like to talk about it because I don't want it to be negative, you know, but, you know, we were going to an international school, which, as you know, Hedi, you're exposed to a lot of different cultures, you know, very privileged. So we had that. Then we had Mom, who was a school teacher. She didn't earn much. So my dad was obviously paying for our international, you know, school fees. So we were there. And obviously he'd also been very much a part of, you know, our discipline and our, how can I say, you know, he played a very key role basically in our identity, as well as free spirits, if you like, growing up in Zambia with an Australian dad who was very adventurous. And so we had that too, to bring with us. So when we landed in Katherine, which is not even Darwin, it's 3 hours down from the main city. It's a very small country town, one high school, as my twin sister said. You know, we were different. We were like, we weren't Aboriginal, you know. We spoke this way. You know, people were like, who are these girls? Where are they from? You know, what are they? You know, they wanted to try and place us in what they thought, you know, Africans, you know, were still doing, if you like. So that took adjusting on their part. But, you know, as Nandi said, we had some of the best times, because once we got over that, you know, trying to suss each other out, you know, school friends and teachers and so forth, we developed the strongest, you know, friendships with males. Actually, they were our guy friends, very close. You know, we did everything together, in the sense that, you know, I remember going to the river, the local river, and, you know, croc spotlighting, you know, that means, torch, looking for small crocs, you know, and, you know, camping. I mean, what didn't we do, you know? Swimming in rock pools, or billabongs, as you call them. I mean, we really experienced true, authentic Crocodile Dundee country, you know?
For real.
Yeah, for real. So
I remember this one time we swam the Kathleen Gorge.
Yes,
yes.
It's a river where it's so windy and you just don't know what's underneath you. you
Well,
know.
there were alligators for sure. There was
Yeah,
signs that was saying that.
crocodiles, yeah. But we did that, you know, and all of that adventure, you know, has made us who we are as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we embraced the good, you know, of society in Australia and what it had to offer. You
Mhm.
know, we went for it, you know, we got our degrees, we got our masters, you know, I think we can safely say that Australia was good for us too, you know.
Okay. Dr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wilkins, you were
Oh,
saying
sorry.
something?
I was just saying, as I'm listening to this, it's just an amazing, amazing story. And I think that, Nandi, you put it very well. You said when you're going to another culture, you cannot change their culture because these experiences that you're talking about, those are with you for life. And that's part of who you are. But I loved what you said about you can still find common ground with anyone of any culture. And I think the combination, I think, from what I took away from this Haiti and Nandi and Chicago is find that common ground, and then everyone is deserving of respect. I love those two principles that you said.
Yeah,
That's what I'm taking away from this, which is
that's
great.
brilliant. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Nandi, did you have any last words you wanted to share about some tips you want people to take from your learning?
Yeah, I just think, you know, if someone could take something home, yes, excellent, what you said, Dr. Wilkins. But yeah, I think it's very important how you present yourself to others,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and obviously they don't know your story, you don't know theirs.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think, you know, you are an incredible individual and your story matters as well. You know, your journey is just as important. And all these puzzles, you know, when we all come together, it's just an incredible menagerie or collage of, you know, of humanity. And that's just such a beautiful story.
Yeah, and I think one, if you can take something away as well, if I can add to what you're saying, Nandi, is, you know, collectively we're just so unique if we look for the uniqueness in others, you know, and not look for the differences. And as you said, Dr. Wilkins, look for the common ground in each other, because that's what makes you laugh, makes you smile, makes you sort of blend, you know, different foods. I'm coming back to foods.
That's the baby talking.
You know, and enjoy each other, you know. I know sometimes, as you say, in the workplace, it can be difficult when you have people that are very individualistic, but even within that, there's commonality somewhere, you know, just like there was with Hedi when we first met. We
Yeah.
instantly found commonality, the common ground between us all.
Yeah.
And hence why we're triplets now.
Well, there's a comment from our audience. Great discussion. I see that both of you are successful, having a multicultural background. I was raised in the US for 10 years and went back to Japan, a relatively monocultural country, at 11 experiencing an identity crisis. I can imagine, Juntaro, we're going to have to do a live stream with you as well. You did the flip, Juntaro. I think you went from an individualistic society to collectivist, and Shebo and Nandi did the opposite. In the inside, I was American. On the outside, I was no different from a typical Japanese. I had difficulty adopting to the Japanese culture, and sometimes didn't feel like I fit in. But at some point, I realized the advantages of being multicultural, probably the same for both of you. And yeah, what I hear as well is that, again, I love what you both said, the importance of respect, the importance of understanding we are all different and to celebrate those differences.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to find the differences and critique them and to think, oh, that's strange. Why would you do that? Or why would you think that way? And instead of saying, wow, I can learn from that. Okay, that's maybe not the way I think, but wow, that's very interesting, because that is what broadens our horizons and helps us to learn. And a lot of that really comes from a place of employing humility and humbling ourselves and recognizing we're not the most important person in the room. we can learn from others. Others are equally, like you said, we all have things to offer. All have our own stories, and each one is important. And so I really, really appreciate both of your times.
Thank you, Hedi and Dr. Wilkins. We appreciate this.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.